Hey guys, number one Marmaduke fan here. How long has it been since I've just pointed my phone at a doodle on the world's greatest book holder or whatever this is to do a quick review? All right, I'm going to do this real quick because I basically just have one really nice thing to say about this TV series, and then I want you to go watch it. So I just finished Arthur and George, a BBC adaptation of a historical novel. It is based on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, who apparently got involved in a real life mystery. Now, this is something I always had heard about the real Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, that he had worked as an investigator at one point. So, of course, I watched this. I think, wait a second, what could this be based on? Is this all made up? And of course, to my surprise, there is an actual mystery that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle got involved with. Now, I'm sure that there's a little Hollywoodization. Of course, you got to make it an exciting mystery, but just the fact that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was involved in a mystery, I feel like that should be one of those cool facts that gets brought up at dinner more often. So if you don't know, I crazy love the Sherlock Holmes stories. I can proudly say I have I think this year, for the very first time, I read every single Sherlock Holmes story. I read about 2 books worth of them when I was in high school. I just remember being in pure bliss the entire time I was in high school, reading Sherlock Holmes stories. I read them again this year as an adult for the first time and tracked down every one I never read as a high school student. And I was in pure bliss the entire time I was reading them as an adult. There's a reason Sherlock Holmes is the famous prototype of the modern detective character, and that if they weren't actually good stories in their own right, maybe he'd be known as, oh yeah, the first detective character, but he wouldn't be as well loved as he is today. And I'm an insufferable hipster on Sherlock Holmes. I am proud of being a hipster. The BBC series with Benedict Cumberbatch, that sucks. That misses the whole point of the character. The Granada series with Jeremy Brett, I will put on series after series of hipster glasses to proclaim how good the Jeremy Brett series is, because, okay, the reason I'm recommending Arthur and George is I think it gets one thing really right about the character of Sherlock Holmes. And if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan and you've missed this, you got to check it out, because I think it has one of the most profound little insights into Holmes I've ever seen in media outside of the Holmes stories themselves. So the thing that people get wrong about Sherlock Holmes is they think, oh, well, he's the smartest detective ever. He's super duper smart, and that's his thing. Now, he is super duper smart, but that's not who the character is. And there's confirmation of this in the books. Sherlock Brothers Mycroft, Sherlock Holmes himself admits, has better powers of deduction than Sherlock Holmes. So why do we read the Sherlock Holmes stories and not the Mycroft Holmes stories? Because Mycroft Holmes is lazy and just sits around in the Diogenes Club, basically reading newspapers and not talking to anybody. So Sherlock Holmes is smart, but if you gave him an IQ test, he's not quite as smart as Mycroft. But what makes Sherlock Holmes is his intense energy. And this is what a lot of pop culture depictions of Sherlock Holmes missed. He goes and gets his man because to Sherlock, it's a form of fun. And if it's not cocaine, if it's not smoking cocaine, it's catching bad guys. And the pure logical side of mysteries are almost more important to him than the sordid details of it all. It's a brilliant framing device for a series of stories. All of them individually are good in their own right. Anyway, so that stuff aside, so what's good about Arthur and George? So what I love about Arthur and George is there was a dumb thing they could have done that they avoided doing. So the dumb thing that you could do is say, oh, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle solved a real-life mystery. Well, let's do a story where he's just like Sherlock Holmes, and his buddy George, well, he's just like Dr. Watson. So that would be kind of cringy, and they didn't do that. So what they really do is something a lot more subtle, and it actually kind of makes a really interesting point on the relationship between an artist and their art, or a writer and the character they've created. So Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is older. He's a celebrity now, and he's celebrated as the creator of Britain's famous favorite detective character. And he loses his wife in kind of like his older age. He's kind of guilty about this. He's not too sure what to do with himself. And he's presented with an opportunity to solve a mystery by a young Indian man who claims to have been falsely accused of a crime. He served time in jail, and he just wants to clear his name. Arthur believes him instinctively and starts looking into it. Now, the way they avoid the, Arthur Conan Doyle's just like Sherlock thing is they have Arthur Conan Doyle as an investigator not be as brilliant or as committed as Sherlock Holmes, right? He's a writer by craft, not a police inspector by craft. In fact, the fact that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is not Sherlock Holmes gets brought up and pointed out to him a lot. There were people who recognized him in the street and talked to him about how, what big fanboys they are of Sherlock. And he's just trying to get to the bottom of things. There are police investigators who will tell him, look, that's the world of fiction, Sir Arthur. Maybe as a writer, you shouldn't be sticking your nose in police business, which is great because it kind of underscores this very human thing where if a writer of mystery stories tried to solve a mystery, the question would be, well, could he translate his knowledge of the fictional world into a real world situation? There's also an element where there's a little, so it's not that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is Sherlock Holmes, it's that there's a little bit of Sherlock Holmes in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, but there's also a little bit of Dr. Watson in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So whereas in the books, there's always this great, fantastic interplay between Holmes and Watson, where Watson is always two steps behind Holmes' deductive reasoning. Watson isn't a dumb character, by the way. He's a real badass. That's the other thing you pick up from the Sherlock Holmes stories. But anyway, it is true, however, that Holmes is always two steps ahead of Watson, even though Watson is a badass. For Arthur and George, the interplay is a little bit different. They parallel that relationship, but Arthur is more fallible, and George gives more pushback than Watson ever would. There's also a neat thing where Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's imagination as a writer is contrasted with Holmes' sort of being the perfect detective, kind of in human form. So something that gets brought up to Arthur as he's investigating is, you're a writer, and you've told me that when you write these stories, you start with the ending and you work your way towards the conclusion of the mystery, right? Because how are you going to write a mystery story if you don't know how it ends and what the twist is? And Arthur admits, yep, that's how I write these stories. And what he's challenged is, you believe this young man was innocent based on interviewing him, which means you have your conclusion in mind, which means you're looking for the conclusion you want to find, which is a real tough challenge to Arthur because it could be true. And maybe he can't do what Sherlock Holmes does just because he created the character and writes the character's story. So it's a very, not only does it give like a neat little insight into Sherlock Holmes, the character, and how Sherlock contrasts with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the writer, it's also a very human story of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle trying to maybe prove something to himself in his old age, maybe try to go on an adventure and do something with himself beyond just writing about the world he creates. And there are also great stakes where if he humiliates himself, if he tries to play detective and makes an ass of himself and accuses the police of doing something without evidence, that would tarnish the reputation of Sherlock Holmes, his character. So there are real world stakes for the people he's investigating. There are stakes for Arthur Conan Doyle personally. The mystery itself, it's an okay little mystery. I'd say it's not like better than any of the Sherlock Holmes stories, but it feels as good as one of the good old Sherlock Holmes short stories, where there's some good twisteroos, there are some potential suspects who get exonerated. There's even like a great thread where Doyle has to grapple with the evidence against his client as he's trying to prove his client's innocence. Maybe he's a little too prejudiced in favor of his client. There's a nice really well implemented theme of racial prejudice. I think a lot of stories about racial prejudice are so ham-fisted and lecturing that it doesn't have any value. So his client is Indian. So there's this question for Arthur Conan Doyle is, do you think being Indian had anything to do with people accusing you of this crime? Or do you think that there might be anybody who hates you for being Indian and is harassing you or doing all this creepy stuff because of that? His client doesn't want to believe that. His client kind of just wants to get this behind him and get on with his life. And it's almost like his client doesn't want to believe that people would do that to him because he's Indian, maybe because he's in denial. But then there's also this question of, is Arthur too quick to see that as a solution to this mystery? So there's this great element where if you have a framework for how to solve the mystery, that framework could cause you to ignore certain evidence if it doesn't fit into the narrative you're building. There's also some great tension. So if there's a logical side to Sherlock Holmes mysteries, there's also an adventure side to Sherlock Holmes mysteries. And I think that's the strongest aspect of Arthur and George, where whoever the bad guy is, they're incredibly creepy, kind of like a prototype of modern serial killers with the hints and clues they're leaving. So all this is to say is, if you are a Sherlock Holmes fan of the actual Sir Arthur Conan Doyle stories, I think you'll get a huge kick out of Arthur and George. I won't spoil the mystery because I believe mysteries should be experienced fresh, and a really neat little insight into the relation of a creator and his creation. And of course, you've got to check out the original stories and the Granada TV series starring Jeremy Brett. You know, the other thing that reminded me of Sherlock Holmes recently is C.S. Lewis mentions Sherlock Holmes a lot. I'm pretty sure that Lewis intended Sherlock Holmes to have actually existed in the world of Narnia. And the other great line he has in That Hideous Strength is, one of the characters got embarrassed at some point and was afraid to read kids' books anymore. So then he goes back and he reads books from his childhood, and he realizes, wow, these are better than a lot of the adult books I've read, except for the Sherlock Holmes stories. So C.S. Lewis agrees this belongs in the canon of literature. Anything else? Oh yeah, tomorrow I will be on the Right Geeks channel to discuss C.S. Lewis's Perelandra, which is why I had that at the top of my mind. If you check out Arthur and George, what do you think? Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. Let me know of other Sherlock Holmes media that you love and think I should check out. With that, I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. He doesn't say elementary. Wait. He doesn't say elementary, my dear Watson. I think he does say elementary several times. And he does wear the deerstalker cap in Sidney Paget's illustrations. So fake Sherlock Holmes hipsters, they'll tell you Sherlock Holmes never wore a deerstalker cap. That's just in the movies. Sidney Paget drew Sherlock Holmes with a with the deerstalker cap, and I'm pretty sure that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle approved Sidney Paget's illustrations. So if my memory is correct, fact check. I'm the biggest Sherlock hipster on the internet. I have the card to prove it. All right, for real this time. #1 Marmaduke fan. Love you guys. Catch you later.